So the iPhone XS Max came out so many years ago, back in 2018, and I will definitely tell you the XS Max is a very decent iPhone. When it first came out, it was very good. It was the first Max iPhone that we technically got from Apple, but so many years later, I will tell you this is an interesting iPhone to say the least. I still think it's worth buying for sure because it's still supported with software, but I don't necessarily think this is the first iPhone I'd recommend people to buy, and I'll explain that basically throughout this video. Now, if you want to pick up some phones I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the iPhone XS Max, I definitely do think this is a pretty interesting looking iPhone still, because it still looks very good, and I still think it's a very, very good performing iPhone from the exterior as well. So this iPhone on the front had a 6.5 inch Super Retina OLED display. And when it first came out, I thought it was a good looking panel. And it's still a very good looking panel for sure. It's crazy because this iPhone is 6 years old right now, and it doesn't really seem or look like it's a super old looking iPhone. It still looks very good, and I'm a big fan of the way this particular phone holds up from that perspective, from that standpoint. So you're getting that massive display, you're getting a notch up top as well, which can be kind of hit or miss for some people. Personally, for me, I don't really think it's a massive deal, but it is nice to have the whole dynamic island that we have nowadays. But still, I think the notch or whatever is still perfectly fine. It's not really even that big of a deal if I'm being completely honest. Now, the other thing is that this phone doesn't have a 60 Hz panel. It does have a 60 Hz panel. It doesn't have a 120 Hz ProMotion panel, which can be kind of an annoying thing for some people. But I don't really think, once again, it's that big of a deal. And this type of panel is perfectly fine for a lot of people. On the bottom, you're getting a Lightning port, kind of a curved side to it, which still looks pretty good. And on the back side, you're getting this glass back. Now this glass back still looks great. I still think it feels very, very good in the hand. It doesn't really feel super cheap or anything like that, which is something that I really like about these types of phones. They don't feel like cheap phones. They feel like fairly expensive devices, which is very nice to have. And I definitely would tell you on the exterior, this is a very, very good looking device. The dual camera setup, the wireless charging, everything going around about this phone still looks and feels very good. My only slight issue I have with the outside maybe is maybe the lack of frosted glass back and ProMotion display. Other than that, I think this is a very good looking display from that perspective, and it still looks very good and very sharp on the exterior. So at least on the outside, it holds up very, very well against phones like the iPhone 15 Pro Max and the 14 Pro Max, especially when it comes down to the 13 Pro Max and 14 Pro Max, that holds up better. Since the 15 Pro Max last year, they did change up the design a little bit more, so it doesn't hold up insanely well against those, but still a very good looking phone nonetheless. So on the exterior, that kind of covers it up there. Now, in terms of the camera side of things, this iPhone on the backside does have that dual camera setup, so it has that wide and telephoto lens. And I personally do feel like it's a pretty decent type of lens to have on this type of phone. So you're getting 4K at 60 on the back of this phone, which looks pretty good. I think it's a pretty good looking lens. And on the front, you're getting that 7 megapixel standard camera. So the thing with this type of camera is that with both the back and the front camera, it was pretty good. I still felt like it was kind of about the same thing you were getting on the iPhone X, but I did actually like having this type of phone because you were actually able to get a pretty decent camera with a massive viewfinder. That camera quality was insane, because of the massive camera you were getting on this thing, which was actually pretty insane just in and of itself, that you were getting this big of a display, the biggest display we've ever seen on an iPhone in this particular phone. So I think that, deserves some credit here for this particular phone. But again, it's not the most insane thing ever, and it's still it's a good camera for how old this phone is, but it's not an amazing camera anymore. I think the biggest thing we're lacking here is 4K at 60 on the front and the lack of an ultra-wide camera. I feel like if this phone had those two things, I think that would have changed up a lot. But the fact that we basically don't have any of, we don't have an ultra-wide camera and we don't have a telephoto lens kind of puts this phone in a little bit of a weirder spot. And I'm not really too sure 100% way of putting it, but I don't know if this would be the first phone I'd recommend people to buy because the camera is so good or anything like that. That's not really what I see here, to be honest. So that kind of covers it up here. Now, in terms of the software and longevity, this is another kind of interesting thing going on here too. So with both of these phones, you're basically getting somewhat of a different type of experience here, because on one hand, it's still supported with software, but on the other hand, it's kind of outdated with software a little bit, which is kind of not the annoying thing here, but it's one of those things to keep in mind. If you're getting a device like this, you're not really getting the most up-to-date, you're getting the most up-to-date phone, but you're not getting a phone that's going to be supported with software for tons and tons of years. We're already kind of on its last leg of software. I don't know if it's going to be getting iOS 18. If it does, that's perfect. But if it doesn't, well, then we're kind of stuck again. So, I'm recommending a phone to people to buy when it's already kind of outdated with software. It just doesn't make me feel super comfortable recommending this type of phone to people. So I think from that perspective, it's, a good phone. I've always liked it. I think it's a good phone, but I don't know if this is a phone I'd recommend people to buy because of the software, to be honest. So take it as you will. I'm still thinking it's a great phone, it still has a lot of stuff going for it, but this is just one of those phones that I wouldn't really recommend people to buy if you're trying to keep a phone for like 3 or 4 years. If you need a phone for like a year or two, then this is more than enough. But if you're trying to keep it more than a year, this is probably going to be a problem for some people. So just kind of keep that in mind, but that's kind of how I see it there. Performance-wise, it still has that Apple A12 Bionic chip inside of it with 4 gigabytes of RAM. Now, personally for me, I think this phone with its performance and everything is still like fairly decent. Like it really isn't that bad of a performing device for how old this phone is. And the biggest thing going on here, as I mentioned before, is the fact that it's still, basically giving you that, A12 Bionic, and it still has that pretty decent chipset inside. So because of that, and on top of that with the gestures as well, and this device's performance actually still looks very, very good, from everything I've really kind of thrown at it. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind here, that when you are getting a device like this, you're getting a device that basically does have a very, very decent chipset for how old it is, and you're getting that gesture-based design, which is very nice to have as well. So personally for me, I think that's a really cool thing going on here. And although this phone, like I said, isn't perfect, it's a very, very good phone from that perspective, which is something I actually like a lot for this particular device. So I would tell you from the performance side, when I compared it against my iPhone, 12s, 13s, and 14s, it handles fairly well, but against when I, compared it against the Pro Maxes of those models, like the 13 Pro Max and 14 Pro Max, the areas that you definitely see where you're missing out a lot on is the areas like RAM comparison, because this phone doesn't have as much RAM as those ones. Definitely app opening speeds and all that, but probably one of the biggest things, when it comes down to it, is probably the ProMotion display. The lack of a ProMotion display actually does kind of it doesn't slow this phone down, but it makes this phone feel so much slower, which is a big thing to keep in mind. When you're getting a phone like this, and I know I say that a lot, but when you're getting a phone like this, you want it to be as fast as possible for as long as possible. It's still a pretty fast phone, it's not a slow phone by any means, but you are actually getting a much faster phone on the newer ones than this one, and that ProMotion display, or the lack thereof, kind of does make this phone feel a little bit slower when it comes down to it. So kind of keep that in mind. That's just one of the big things to keep in mind here too. I've always also felt like battery life wasn't that great on this phone, and that's basically what's going on again. When you're getting a phone like this, the battery life really isn't that amazing. It's, it was good when it first came out, kind of, but even then it really wasn't that massive. We have phones now that have much bigger size batteries. So once again, it doesn't make a lot of sense to buy this phone anymore either, because you're able to get a phone that has much better battery life than this particular device as of this point. So to kind of sum up this whole entire video, what I'll definitely tell you is, I think the iPhone XS Max, I think it was a good iPhone when it first came out for the most part, but I don't know if this would be the first iPhone I'd recommend to people. And this is not an iPhone I would recommend people to buy if you're trying to get an iPhone that's, going to be here for many years to come. If you're going to buy an iPhone today and then it's going to be gone tomorrow, or you're going to keep it for a year or two, or if you don't care about software updates or anything, then obviously if you don't buy this phone, who cares? But if you're trying to keep an iPhone that's going to be here for several more years, I don't know if this is an option, or I don't know if this is an iPhone I'd recommend people to buy from that specific perspective, if I'm being completely honest with you. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, not only so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.